Sometimes a single loss isn't just, well, a loss. It's one of those moments where history just takes a sharp turn, right? A legacy that felt totally set in stone is suddenly on hold. And that's exactly what we saw in the 2025 Formula One season. So we're going to dive into the five, honestly, incredible records Max Verstappen was this close to grabbing and how they all just, poof, vanished in that one crazy finale. So it all came down to the wire. The final Grand Prix in Abu Dhabi. I mean, you could cut the tension with a knife. It was just unbelievable. After a whole season of insane drama, Verstappen had somehow clawed his way into this epic title fight with McLaren's Lando Norris, and it went down to the very last lap. But, well, fate had other plans. He fell just short. And this, right here, this is the number that's probably gonna haunt him. 2. Just 2 points. Think about that for a second. After 24 races, thousands of miles, endless battles on the track, the difference between making history with a 5th world championship and coming in second was just 2 tiny points. I mean, it's a margin that's almost impossible to even wrap your head around. But see, this wasn't just about losing one trophy. No. The real story here is what that trophy actually stood for. We're talking about a whole collection of massive, monumental career achievements that were just wiped clean off the board. And to really get the scale of this, we've got to look at how unbelievably improbable it was that he was even in this fight to begin with. What's so wild about this whole thing is that for the first half of the year, nobody, and I mean nobody, was even mentioning Verstappen's name for the title. It was all about McLaren. Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, they had a huge edge. Even after Max's home race as Zandvoort, he was still way, way back. It wasn't until Red Bull rolled out this massive upgrade that the car suddenly came alive, and that's when he started his incredible charge. And man, what a charge it was. It was setting the stage for what could have been one of the most amazing comeback stories the sport has ever seen. But in the end, that story had the most heartbreaking final chapter you can imagine. He basically did the impossible just to get into the fight. But that very last step, it was just out of his reach. 104. That's how many points Verstappen was behind Oscar Piastri at one point. Just to get back into the conversation for the title, he had to overcome a 104-point deficit. It was so massive, it seemed like a total fantasy. But somehow, race by race, he was doing it. So this leads to a pretty huge question, right? If he'd actually pulled it off, closed that gap, and won the whole thing, would it have been the biggest comeback in F1 history? Well, that brings us to the very first major record that slipped right through his fingers. And here's the ironic part. The record for the biggest points comeback to win a championship, it already belonged to Max. But what he was trying to do in 2025, that was on a whole other level, not even in the same ballpark. And this just shows you the insane scale we're talking about. Back in 2022, right, he came back from 46 points down against Charles Leclerc. Super impressive. That was the record. But in 2025, he was on pace to more than double his own record by clawing back those 104 points. Winning would have set a benchmark for comebacks that, honestly, might never have been broken. Ever. Okay, so the second historic achievement on the line, this one was even bigger. Seriously, this wasn't just about breaking some stat. This was about equaling one of the absolute legends of the sport, the great Michael Schumacher. Just take a look at this. Winning 4 championships in a row puts you in this super elite club, right? You're talking legends like Fangio, Vettel, Hamilton. Max already got his membership card for that club with his wins from 2021 to 2024, but you see that name right at the top? Only one driver in the history of Formula One, Michael Schumacher, has ever won 5 consecutively. And Max was one race, just those 2 points, away from standing shoulder to shoulder with the Kaiser himself. But it doesn't stop there. Beyond those 2 massive headline-grabbing records, that loss to Norris wiped out 3 other really unique but still super significant lines in the history books. Let's run through them real quick. All right, this next one is kind of quirky. A bit of an unusual record, but it says so much about a driver's raw talent. It's basically a measure of how many times a driver has single-handedly dragged their car to a world title, even when the team itself wasn't good enough to win the Constructors' Championship. And get this for a great piece of F1 trivia. Verstappen was tied for this record, with 2 titles like that. And who was he tied with? Nelson Piquet, who, as you might know, just so happens to be his girlfriend Kelly Paquette's dad. A win in 2025 would have given him the ultimate bragging rights at the dinner table for sure.
Okay, on to feat number 4. This one is all about age. It feels like Max has been around forever, doesn't it? But he's still so young. And that's the key here. If he had won that 5th title in 2025, he would have been the first and only driver in history to win 5 championships before turning 30. Just think about that. The other guys who've won 5, Schumacher and Fangio, they were well into their 30s when they got there.
And that brings us to the 5th and final one, his legacy at Red Bull Racing. It's simple, really. His 4th title in 2024 tied him with Sebastian Vettel. They were co-kings of the team. But that 5th championship, that would have ended the debate. Period. He would have stood alone as the undisputed #1 greatest driver in Red Bull history.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, losing by just 2 points in Abu Dhabi wasn't just about losing one race. It was about losing the chance to completely rewrite the record books in 5 huge, profound ways all in one go.
I mean, let's just run that back one more time. We're talking about the biggest comeback in F1 history, tying a Schumacher record that people thought was untouchable, breaking that unique record he shared with Nelson Piquet, becoming the first ever 5-time champ before turning 30, and becoming the undisputed greatest driver in Red Bull history. All of it just gone. Which really just leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Did this one single, razor-thin loss totally redefine Max Verstappen's legacy, or was it just a delay? A dramatic pause in a story that is still a long, long way from being finished? I guess only time will tell.